So much for taking time to come and join us today as we talk about one of the most uncomfortable conversations that normally we run away from. We were talking with some of our colleagues on a debrief just before we came here, and we're talking about speaking truth to power. To say in most cases when you decide to speak truth to power, it tends to ruffle so many feathers. Nobody wants to hear the truth. But today we're going to call it exactly as it is. We're not going to call it a garden tool. We're going to call it spade a spade. Jonga, when I was looking at some, when we're rounding up about this event, and something was posted on TikTok by the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit, I remember one of the students saying, and I quote, "If it's a no, hell no, it's a no." And I loved that. And there was one male student who said, consent is when two people agree to do that thing. I wish that student was here to tell me which thing was he referring to. But all the same, why we are here today, especially when we look, today is the 1st of August, and this is Women's Month. We are not saying that our male counterparts and any other gender identities do not experience the issues of sexual consent either way, but all of us will agree that this affects women more than anything. So before we even start, sizafuna ukuthi sibulise igama lamakhosikazi. Sifuna ukulibulisa silibulisa igama lamakhosikazi. This is a month of women empowerment. This is a month whereby we remember women that have died fighting for a worthy cause. This is a month whereby we remember women that are sitting in our homes, girls that are sitting even in this institution that have gone through so much, but they were scared to talk. So we are being the voice of the voiceless. So just a bit, because this is our month. We have to shine. We are phenomenal women. We are wonderfully made. We are beautifully made. And we have to be the voice of the voiceless. Igama lamakhosikazi ma. As Pagamen, if we can. Igama lamakhosikazi ma. Libongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe igama lamakhosikazi ma. Libongwe igama lamakhosikazi ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe ma. Libongwe. Haha, singahlala Nkosi. Kusazoba shushu up. Kusazoba lit. This was just the beginning. Kade sesesuku arrival and registration is going to be going as we go along with our program. Before actually I invite Dr. Chris for we welcome and purpose of the day, let me take this opportunity to welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sakela Butlungu, Principal Wano College. Let's welcome our Vice Chancellor. Enkos. Another round of applause for our Vice Chancellor. Aha! Gwabamnandi. And I also want to take this time to welcome our visitors that are here. I'm sure your programs are just in Nazo Pambilu. And you can see we've gone all out. So that is what we did. We said if we're going to have this conversation, there's no way that we're going to do it on our own. Let's reach out there to other institutions. We bring them here and they tell us how they are doing it, how they've done it, and how we should also do it. So today we're also going to be tapping into the best practices of these universities. May we give a warm welcome to Sheena Sharma from Wits University. Nanzo. And then we also welcome Lindsay Kellent from Rhodes University, Center for Leadership and Ethics. Beautiful, phenomenal women. Yabonga. And then we also want to welcome Dr. Chris. Chris is here at the University of Fort Hare. I'm sure you know Stuart, or we've got what to call a clear boardroom. Don't worry, I'm going to talk more about Dr. Chris when it is time. A warm welcome to Dr. Chris. And then I also want to welcome our Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit Director. I always refer to her as my director. Into in a unity today. But it's an obvious case that this couldn't happen if she doesn't have any support, not only from the leadership, but also from the students and the staff that are here. A warm welcome to our director, Miss Nonhlanhla Moyo. Asiphindeni futhi kanjalo. Aha, thank you. And I also want to welcome Palesa Pampa, and also referred to as Pamutungu Transformation Lady. Have you ever watched that movie called The Transformer? You know that movie called The Transformer? That is what she's referred to. Pamutungu, the Transformer, the Transformation Lady. Please stand up. We want to see you. Pali in the house. But to try as transformism, as transformer, transformation lady. And then I want to welcome all of you. Your being here, it means a lot to us. If we sent out this invitation and you didn't take time out of your busy schedules to say, and we want into Lego YouTube, in person, that on its own, it means a lot to us. I want to welcome all of you. I hope you are going to enjoy as we drive this ship. I don't want to say as I drive this ship or this aeroplane or this car. We are going to be driving this program together. As we drive this program together, please take note of any burning questions that you're going to have. And please feel free to post them to our speakers today and even to the Vice Chancellor who's here and any other person that you think the question might be directed to. So can we please clap hands for ourselves for being here? I clapping le I ko shushu ga ibe shushu. Nanzo. And then a quick check. I can see here we've got poetry performance by Undlovu. Is Undlovu here? Yebo! Aha! Undlovu. Wave again. Shine, shine, girl, shine. This is your month. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. This is actually a very important discussion. I actually want to make reference. I've always said it before, and I'm going to repeat. Ifote is a trendsetter. We lead and they follow. We do not want to take this conversation lightly because what we're going to be doing today, looking at one of the first ever cases that have to do with the issues of consent. Fort Hare, out of all the universities of South Africa, have decided to hold the bull by its horns and say we're the ones that are going to discuss about this openly. We're going to speak truth to power today. So as we go through our discussion, I don't want to preempt what is going to be said by our speakers, as we want to give them enough time to engage with us and we understand what is this thing about consent? What does sexual consent mean? Where do I stop? Where do I draw the line? Does no mean yes? And when we've gotten to that point of foreplay and everything, and if I say no, do you have a right to continue? I can hear someone saying no. So we're going to look at all those things. What does consent mean when one is drunk? What does consent mean when I'm not feeling okay and I'm telling you I'm in pain? Guys, maybe most of us, maybe some of us, we haven't. But we're here to learn. Why I'm so happy about this issue is because whatever that we're going to learn here today, it gives us an opportunity to go and teach even other people out there, be it at home, our younger sisters, even our own mothers, our own brothers, obhuti bethu, ukuthi jonga kade nisesikoleni today bethetha nge-consent emfundini, watch out. May I have this opportunity, or let me say by the powers invested in me today, by the Vice Chancellor of the institution, and the Director of the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit, I declare this conversation on the myths, facts, and realities, a dialogue on sexual consent open. Haha, asqhakeze nini izandla? Thank you so much. May I take this opportunity to call Dr. Chris to come and give us a welcome and purpose of the event. Before actually Chris does that, I actually want to draw something out to all of us that are here to say, maybe most of you know that we do have a sexual harassment policy in this institution. Did you know that Chris is also behind the drawing up of the sexual harassment policy? You didn't, ne? You know, Dr. Chris, may I call you Chris because that is what I'm used to saying, with your permission. Chris is one person whom we call when an event is completed, and we always say we want to give a special thank you to the crew behind the scenes. Because if the crew behind the scenes is not on board, nothing can actually go well. Dr. Chris is the director of the Center for Leadership Ethics in Africa, CLIE, here at the University of Fort Hare. This is a cross-disciplinary initiative that conducts research and shapes debates about leadership and ethics. E-consent is also about ethics. Chris has been here for a very long time in this institution. I remember the days when we started Stand as One Against Gender-Based Violence at the University of Fort Hare. By then I was still doing my PhD in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, 8 years ago. And he was so open for us to come and use the CLIE boardroom when we used to connect with our counterparts in East London campus. And we'll go out of his way to make sure we've got tea, we have everything we discussed. For us to have the first ever Gender-Based Violence Day at the University of Fort Hare, it is because of the likes of Dr. Chris, Professor Mariana Olusven, who's not here, myself, and some other members that have since left the University of Fort Hare, and they're making a mark out there. So it is my honor to say, Dr. Chris, this is your moment today. Can you please come and welcome us? Thank you. Izandla for Dr. Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, thanks, Belita. That's a very kind welcome. So thank you for coming today, everyone, for attending today's dialogue on sexual consent. And special thanks to our Vice Chancellor for participating on the program, and to Sheena Swema and Lindsay, and also to the students who contributed to our call for responses, creative responses. Which quite a few people went through a lot of responses. There were quite a lot, and some very passionate views, and some very informed views that were shared. So thank you for participating in that. So today's dialogue addresses matters of human relations that they can be very pleasant, and very stimulating and exciting and fulfilling when they're done right. And they can be very unpleasant and intimidating and repulsive, even terrifying when they're done wrong. So in theory, we're not talking about a very complex situation. Either your sexual partner is clearly enjoying themselves and they're going along with you, or they are not. Isn't that obvious? It's quite a simple thing. If they're not, why do you want to be going on? It doesn't make sense. Why would you continue? But in practice, things are not so straightforward. And for instance, asking for consent in the middle of a romantic encounter, it's a little bit like now you have to suddenly stop everything or find a condom. That's often can interrupt the process. Then you open the packet, you have to roll this thing on. It's not very romantic. And asking consent can also be like interrupting that process. It can be a very embarrassing moment, a very deflating moment in the excitement of the moment. So consent is not always something that we say. It's something that we read in each other's body language. And not everyone is good at reading. So today's dialogue is premised on the fact that there's a lot of confusion, actually. There's a lot of confusion and misreading of each other when it comes to sexual consent. And that's clear from the many cases of sexual assault that happen on university campuses and in our country. So even the very renowned and learned advocate Tembeka Nkokatobi, even he got it wrong on consent. And he ruled that Loise Koko did not rape his partner because she consented to foreplay, to oral sex. And then Loise Koko mistakenly believed that she had consented. So following the judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal on this case, we thought, well, if such an experienced, high-profile senior advocate can get it wrong, then where does this leave ordinary people like us? How are we supposed to know exactly what consent really means? And so we thought we'd have this dialogue for people to get informed and to express their opinions about the complications. A good deal of value is put on consent, so we're constantly bombarded with small print on our phones, in legal documents, asking for our consent. Before you want to download an app, you have to give your consent for all sorts of things. Do you agree these terms and conditions? And actually then, because of this, consent is frequently it's manufactured and it's produced. Consent is produced by advertisers and marketing companies and influencers to get us to say yes when actually we're really thinking no. So we're here to hear from experts and on what consent is and to hear from students how they interpret consent. And hopefully we can find a middle ground in between or a clear ground on what that really means. So we hope you share your views with us. Please don't stay quiet. We're looking for answers. And so when we leave this room, we'll be better informed and then more attentive to each other about these things. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris, for those words. And Chris didn't actually mince his words. It's very clear to say when someone is in a relationship, there's nothing as beautiful as love. I know there's one singer who said, I think it's Michael Bolton who said, love is a wonderful thing when there's consent. When there is consent. Dr. Chris is reminding that it can be passionate, it can be stimulating, you can clearly enjoy, but at that moment when you say no and your partner does not want to listen to you, it can be unpleasant, it can be terrifying, it can leave a mark for life, not only on your body, but in each and everything that has to do with you. No means no. Stop means no. Wait means no. It hurts means no. Not now means no. I'm not sure means no. I've changed my mind means no. I have a boy or a girlfriend means no. No does not mean convince me. Asibuya nguzodlala lapha. Mbano Tesla ndukuzolala. Banobete, sizolala, banobete. Asituleni. Asizangizolala, banobete, sizolala, asizangizolala. Sizolala, banobete. Hi guys, you lukewarm. You are lukewarm. You are lukewarm. We need to get this conversation heated up and we need to get going. Are you feeling cold? Are you feeling cold? Those that feel like standing, you can stand and warm yourself up. Asizangizolala. Sizolala, asizangizolala. Sizolala, banobete. Sizolala, banobete. Sizolala, asizangizolala. Sizolala, asizangizolala. Sizolala, banobete. Sizolala, banobete. Sizolala, asibambe. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Next on our program is our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Sakela Buhlungu, who's going to give us the opening remarks. Before I call upon our Vice Chancellor to give us the opening remarks, I want to touch on a few things, probably maybe which our Vice Chancellor might remember, or may I have this opportunity to maybe remind him today of some things that he has said to us that have built up to the reason why we are here today. Between 30 September and the 1st of October in 2019, Mr. Vice Chancellor, we had our first ever gender-based violence day. We had a total shutdown, actually, in Alice campus and in East London. And by then, we were still very new at the University of Fort Hare. And I quote, there have been reported cases of victims who were threatened if they speak out. But those days are over. I close the quote. Those were your words, Mr. Vice Chancellor. When you're speaking about the issues of gender-based violence, whereby a consent is not even sought when it comes to the issues of intimacy. Sagrita up on 2019. 2020, when we're rounding off the Women's Month in September, the Vice Chancellor said, remember when I started to say it was on Women's Month, this is the month Yamakosigas. Vice Chancellor Principal no College, wati yena. I quote, we need more of these discussions. There is no excuse for gender-based violence in this institution. And there is no excuse for perpetrators. Close quote. We move forward. Just 4 months ago, when we made history in South Africa, when we opened official opening of the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit, and we're making the video that was going around making waves on the 22nd of March, 2024. That is just like 4 months ago. Our Vice Chancellor said, this is us. We are making a public statement to the higher education. Principal, our Vice Chancellor, may you allow me today to add, in South Africa and beyond, about what gender-based violence means, that we're a no tolerance institution when it comes to GBV. To our Vice Chancellor today, we are continuing from where you left off when you were inviting us on the 22nd of March, when we had the official opening of the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit. That we are yet again making another mark. Ngeke ngatsho ngathi singama-trend setters ne, siyatrendisha kaloku. We lead and they follow. We are making a public statement to the institutions of higher learning in South Africa when we discuss for the first time ever on the dialogue of sexual consent, the myths, the facts, and the realities. Not only kuno college, basazosibona ku YouTube sitrenda. Babuye bazosibuza ukuthi lenze kanjani. Ulisapota kanjani uvisi wenu. If you see the Vice Chancellor coming to this conversation, leaving his busy schedule, it means ukuthi this is a very serious dialogue. It is my honor, and also everybody else that is here, to invite you on the podium, Professor Sakela Buhlungu, to come and welcome us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, that's better. I'm sitting there. It must be the cold that's coming through that door. I don't know if we need to open that door. It's very cold for those of us sitting in front. But don't worry, ignore me. But it made me very attentive. One, in 2019, I was not new anymore. I was already going for my third year. It was my third year in the institution. So I was very, very attentive there. Secondly, we launched the house and the offices of the GBV Prevention Unit, yes, in March, not on the 22nd, but on the 26th of March. It's the cold. Blame this on the cold, right? Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, welcome to all of us. Welcome to our honored guests and speakers, and welcome to other participants. And very, very importantly, welcome to our staff and students. Ningoyiki, ne? Sivan? Yeah, ningoyiki, please. I'm not going to be long, but I was intrigued to be invited to this. It's because the subject is unusual. But actually, when I got to reflect on it, this is at the core of everything. This is the core of everything. I know for the last 2 or 3 years, we've held men's dialogues, men's indabas, women's indabas, and queer indaba last year. And we've had these discussions. And I always insist, and I will insist again, I know they're planned now for August, September, that it should be the microphone that leads, not us sitting up front. This is a different one today. But at those dialogues, that's what it should be. And that's how we're going to get to the core issue of consent. Thinking about consent has got in following in the footsteps of the program director. It's got in all the languages there is a word consent. All the languages have the word consent. Everybody knows. No is no, and yes is yes. Everybody knows that, and we know what it is. But when I reflected on this, and then I was trying to imagine all the issues that are going to come up here, that in fact, consent as in agreeing to do something, agreeing to participate in something, agreeing to say something, it's a basic element of humanity, of being human. It's a basic thing. It's the most elementary thing about being human. Yes. Uyafuna uhamba? Yes. Uyafuna ukudya? Yes. Uyafuna usela? No. Yes. That's at the core of humanity, of us being human beings. And in all instances, we often ask the person, do you want to do X, Y? And the person says, yes. Do you want, no, today I don't feel like. Do you want to take a walk? I feel a little lazy today. Today, you say yes. In almost all instances, except this one, which is the subject of today, everyone understands very clearly. Everyone we know exactly what consent means. It means glenas yazenzis. It's because people know. They break through that lack of consent knowingly, actually. Knowingly. You can't say to a person, do you want to eat? And they say, I don't want. And you start force feeding him. It doesn't work like that. You can't say to a person, do you want to take a walk with me? And they say no. And you start dragging them along. Why is it that in the case of intimate issues, of sexual issues, why do we drag the person along? Why do we want to force feed them? The second thing about consent for me, as I was thinking about it and anticipating some of the discussions that are going to take place today, younger people today have a word which was not there in our time. They called it adulting. Adulting. This thing of adulting is difficult. I didn't know. You've got to have a bank account. You've got to have money. This is adulting. But actually, one of the key elements of adulting is consent. It's consent. There's even, and we're talking to lawyers here today, lawyers and researchers. There's even an official statutory age of consent. Eh? That's what it is. It means you're an adult. You can consent. They make you sign, they make you vote, they make you get an ID, they make you have all of these other things. But what it means, if you're an adult, one of the key things you must know, one of the lines that gets drawn in the sand for you, not by you, is the fact that consent is the key. And you're going to be judged based on whether you adhere to consent issues or not. And so it's very, very key. So you can't, therefore, being a 20-year-old, or whatever the age, which I did not know. There's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse. And being in this institution, I've had to deal with countless cases, countless appeals. You see, with issues of rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and so on and so forth, there's a structure, there's structures to process those people. But the final appeal comes to me, comes to my office. And I look at them, and you can get all kind of excuses, people ducking and diving. And all I ask when I get an appeal before me is, was there consent? Is this person not intelligent enough? They're a university student or a university staff member. Are they not intelligent enough to understand what consent means? And if you're a student, you're getting distinctions, or you're getting passes, or you're getting your 51%, that's fine, also forgivable. Even with your 51% kind of pass mark, surely you should be able to understand consent. And it's absolutely vital. So, adults, consent is consent. And the speakers are going to speak about this. But thirdly, I thought about consent in a different way. And this is probably the biggest area. This is probably the biggest area where people trip up and fall. Power. At the heart of consent is the issue of power. At the heart of consent is the issue of power. As power over somebody else. They withhold their consent, but because you have power, then you use that power to railroad your way past that refusal of that denial of consent. And sometimes the fact that the denial seems rather timid and not as strident and strong, and because you're in power, you think, okay, that's it. I'm not going to make an example of yourselves. Think of the office where I work in the university. It's here. And I always say to people, that office is an extremely powerful office. I sit on an extremely powerful chair. And I'm not talking just in terms of signing this off and signing that off. I'm also talking about you can make people do things against their consent. You can make people unable to articulate their consent, even though they're not agreeing. Or you can make people agree to do things because there's an expectation that there will be things, there will be some favors that will come your way. So the issue of consent is not just we're high between this or the other person. It's also, and I'm now looking at those of us on this side of the age spectrum, that the issue of consent can also translate into, or can also be an indication of abuse of power. Abuse of power. Me, I'm a lecturer, right? I'm a lecturer. I stand here every day. I give lectures to you. I have a lot of power over you. You are students. I give marks. Sometimes, I might give you, you might expect that I'll give you not the 51% that you deserve, but that I give you a solid distinction. And therefore, you kind of seem to be consenting. Is that consent? Is that consent? Okay? And many, many, many cases. And so when we talk about this, I'm encouraged by the program director. I'm encouraged by Dr. Olsobrook, the way they talk about it. Don't talk hypothetically about it. Talk about it. I don't know in the past what they used to call it. Nowadays, there's a phenomenon called sex for marks. Sex for marks. Right? And that person, that young person, seems to have consented. They seem to be consenting because, they'll get good marks. They'll get marks. Is that consent? Is that consent? And these are some of these things. And so, yes, I know lawyers are very good people, and I respect them a lot, and I have very good friends who are lawyers. But frankly, if you're going to make judgments and discount or take out the question of power in your consideration, then you're making a big problem. You're doing a disservice to people. You're doing a disservice to humanity. We have here in the university a unit, the Gender-Based Prevention Unit. The program director is correct. We agreed in 2019, we had a shutdown, a day here, shutdown in East London. We adopted a policy, and at the heart of that policy is zero tolerance. And we say zero tolerance because we think and we believe and we know that that consent is fundamental. We also set up a unit of which Ms. Sibanda Moyo is the director, and the staff are part of that director. We now have the full staff, we have an office, and we're doing all of these things. Yes, on Monday, forget, I had a one-on-one briefing. It was made clear that the Office of the Gender Prevention Unit reports to me, reports to the VC's office directly, to elevate, to lift the issues, so that there's no excuse. And so we met for a briefing this past week. And some of the things that she was saying are encouraging, but also worrisome. Encouraging that the reporting rate has increased. The reporting rate of GBV cases has increased, which is great because people feel more protected. They feel safer to talk. There's an office where they can do it in private. They also, in many cases, in the case of women, it's not a case of a young woman reporting to a man, which in itself is highly, highly problematic. We've got staff now who are trained, but also who are appropriately chosen so that they have the skills, they have the know-how, and they have the passion to deal with these issues. So yes, the reporting of cases has increased. That's a good side to it. The worrisome side is that once you have the number of reporting of cases rising, actually on paper, it means more gender-based violence is taking place. Whichever way you want to look at it, that there's more, especially here on Alice campus. Especially here on this campus, I should say. And so we're working with this. The good thing now, we're in a position to have a stable and reliable statistical base from which to work when we deal with these issues. We've invested, we have a full organogram for that unit now, and I think we're doing the last final touches to appointments of staff. And so I'm very, very proud that at the university we now have this dedicated center, and one of its work, part of its mandate is to do exactly these dialogues. But what I like even more is that the unit is not an island sitting somewhere. It's working with centers clear here, and I know the dialogues, men's and women's dialogues and so on, they're going to be working with student affairs, and so they're working with different units in the university to make sure that the main thing is this, and I think Ms. Moyo will explain at the right time about this. We're no longer going to talk platitudes about GBV. All these things that sound nice but are hollow, that are meaningless. We're going to name it and say it like it is. I think Dr. Alsobrook made that point. We're going to have these dialogues and we're going to talk about it. And my invitation to people, especially our students, but also staff. Let me go back. We always think of GBV it's a young person and a young person, young person to young person. Yes, it happens there. That worries me a lot. But what also worries me is a young person and a grown-up adult. People with homes, with households, with children as old as you, who are able to use their positions of power and who are able to use the power of money to basically circumvent these questions of consent that we're talking about. As I conclude, I know, Chairperson, I'm trying to get the discussion going and so on. I just want to conclude on something. And Ms. Moyo and Dr. Alsobrook as co-conveners of this dialogue, something that's important. And I always say, I've worked in other universities, but I decided I will retire from this one. I'll retire from this one. And I'm not very far from it. I made a very conscious choice that I'll retire from this one, and I've never for a single day regretted it. Because there can be no university, not in this country, not in this world, like this one. There's no university like UFH. Absolutely not. No offense to my visitors. No offense. I worked for 14 and a half years at WITS. I know, and so on. And I always go, I have my colleagues at Rhodes and other places. But there's no university like UFH. That's it. That's it. It ends there. It ends there because the soul, the spirit of Fort Hare is different. We also, certainly in the time that I've been here, I've experienced this as a university where we set the trend. We talk about things openly. We are transparent. And I always say to people when we talk about all these other things that are happening, I always say, if you're a surgeon and you have a patient who presents with heart problems, the heart, what do? You have to cut the body up, open. Sometimes you even have to cut the heart open. Deal with the problem and suture it back and do the back and let the wound heal, and that person can still run the next Comrades Marathon. If you're going to have a patient with heart issues and all you do is massage, you're using Vicks to rub over the heart and so on, it takes you nowhere. The problem remains inside. And our approach as Fort Hare is that, and sometimes we're in the news because of this approach, but it's a conscious approach. And it bears fruit in many respects. Now let me tell you this. A university like no other. In the year 2005, this university was awarded the National Order of the Baobab by the President of the Republic. The National Order of the Baobab in gold. In gold. That's 2005. That's recognition of the work that we do, of the students that come here, of the staff that we here, of the resilience of this institution. That's 2005. In the year 2016, this university was awarded the status of a National Heritage Site by the National Heritage Council. That's 2016. And then on Saturday, this past Saturday, the 27th of, what was this month again? July. On Saturday, this university where you are right now was declared by UNESCO as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as of Saturday, this past Saturday. And I'm saying these things because they are important. They are ways in which we're being affirmed, but also they impose a responsibility. You're not going to come to a World Heritage Site of UNESCO and commit GBV. No. You're not going to do that. We're not going to allow you. You're not going to come to this institution that is recognized worldwide for all the good work amidst all of these things that are happening and think that consent means nothing to you. We recognize for precisely because of the values that we hold and some of the things that we're doing. So, let's have an open debate. Let's have an open debate today. And that debate, you must see it as part, as our slogan says, of reclaiming a safer University of Fort Hare. But also, let's have this debate about consent. The connection may not be immediately apparent to you, but this discussion is a core contribution to this debate about a decade of renewal of the university and making it a better institution. than all the others. So thank you very much, and all the best for good discussions. And please be open. Please be open. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start. Mr. Vice Chancellor, thank you so much for setting the tone for us and for reminding us why we are the trendsetters in South Africa and beyond. Thank you for reminding us the importance of transparency in our dialogues, because once we are transparent, then there's the issue of accountability. Thank you for reminding us about the power dynamics that are going round and round, and honestly, we cannot run away from that, because Jonga, lapho kulama power dynamics khona ku relationship akukho safe. Sesithethe inyani ke ngoku. Uvisi usewuvulile, uyivulile inkundla uvisi. Wathi yena, we are not going to call a garden tool. Uthi, no, pass me that garden tool. There are so many garden tools. We are going to call a spade today. If it's a spade, let's call it a spade. If it's a fork, let's call it a fork, as we discussed today. Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, also on touching on the issue of sex for marks, tie for marks. That is a conversation for another day. It goes back to the issue again of e-consent. It goes to the issue of power dynamics. I said earlier on, before our other colleagues came in, and I said love is a beautiful thing. But if that love is not safe anymore, if that love is making you to forget who you are, why you came into this college in the very first place, if that love is making you to run away from the person who's supposed to ask you, uziva kanjani today, Papa? Alright, sithandwa sami. Ngenzele ntoni sweetheart wami? Utshile na? But then if you start running away from that person because now you are scared every time when you say yes, they do not understand, or every time when you say no, they think it's a yes. They don't understand that you've got a right, that even if we've kissed so much, when we've done so much foreplay, I've got a right to say no if I do not want to continue. Is that not the truth? Is that not the truth? Aye, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our Vice Chancellor. Let's give a round of applause to our Vice Chancellor again. Before I call upon Sesingenage right into the gist of the matter. Before we get into the gist of the matter, we're just going to have just 2 minutes of something nice music, Sile younger generation. Apa uvisi uthethe wathi there's this thing about altarting that we have when you are now in adults. There's bank accounts. There's also the issue of consent that we want to run away from. You know, Visik challenged me. He says we can consent to some of the things, and he also said you can actually say, no, I don't want to eat. I don't want to take a walk. I don't want to sleep. I don't want to watch TV. No, I just want to be alone. I want my me time. So what is so difficult about understanding the word consent? Maybe before we ask TJ, ukuthi asichayele ingoma, askeni skesili spell this word called consent, then maybe we can understand what it means. So I'm going to say, give me a C. In the house, can you say C back to me? Okay. With affirmation. Give me a C. Give me an O. Give me an N. Give me an S. Give me an E. Give me an N. Give me a T. What does that spell? What does that spell? I can't hear you. What does that spell? Aha, we lead and they follow. Steady music, DJ, 2 minutes. While our speaker, who's going to give us an overview of the Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, Shina Sama, gets ready. Thank you so much. Over to you. I am just seeing something there. Did you see what I just saw? Did you? Guys, did you know ukuthi bakhona abantu ababuye beprint consent up? You didn't. Before we call, Oshina, when I call out a C, anyone who's holding a C, can you please come to the front here with your C? We need to see it. Give us a C. Who's got a C? Please come. Give us an O. Give us an N. Where's N? Where's N? N, please come, please come. Vuleleni N abuye. There we go. Give us an S. Where's S? Upu S. Give a S, please come down. Thank you. There we go. Give us an E. Who's got E? E, please come. This is your time. This is your moment. Yes. Thank you. Don't give your moments to anyone else. This is your time to shine, girl. Shine, shine, shine. Shine, shine, shine. This is your moment, girl. Give us an N. Yo. The intelligence that I'm seeing here, I'm busy struggling to spell consent. I don't even know. There are students that are sitting on the word consent. This is serious. Yes. Give us an N. Oh, yes. There we go. Give us a T. Who's got a T? T. Yes, there we go. T, this is your moment. Shine, shine, shine. It goes. Oh, wow. What a surprise. What a surprise. Chilosati, we set the trend and they follow. So one more time, what does this spell? What does this spell? Thank you so much, guys. You've just made history. You can go and take your seats and go. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Right. So before I call upon Dr. Sheena, who's the head of Gender Justice Center for Applied Legal Studies, and also looks at the issues of human rights, gender law, and policy consultant. I want to make reference to say, of all the days, yesterday when I was just doing some random reading, and there I go, I bump into her just published paper that talks about consent. Can you guess when this paper was published? 26 July. And she's here today. 26 July. I remember when I was still doing my honors, 2012, please do not calculate my age. When I was an honors student doing my honors in education, we used to say with our friends, when Mr. Matanda, if there are students from education, I'm sure you've been taught by Mr. Matanda, education leadership in management. So we used to submit our assignments very late, maybe on due date actually. And we used to break and say, hayi kaloku, use kumele nxa ebambi assignment am kumele ibe shushu vela ku photocopier. We used to break that the assignment has to be hot. It's just coming from being printed from Xerox when you go and slide it underneath this door with a little note to say, I'm sorry, there was just a long queue at Xerox. This is beyond me. I hope you are going to mark my assignment. Thank you, sir. I always enjoy your lectures. So, it's the same situation that we have here. This new baby, I always want to call the publications new baby, this new baby on board, that is speaking truth to power. It talks about the issues of consent. And she also talks about consent to foreplay. Does not mean to say that automatically you are supposed to have intercourse. She also looks at the issues of the mistaken belief of consent. And lastly, there's something that she says in a publication, that consent is the issue. Where there is rotten root, there will always be rotten fruit. I do not want to overstep my territory. Dr. Shina, over to you. A round of applause. Once again, sichone bezothetha nathi. Enkos, wamkekile kuno college. You call our university kuno college. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Just to say, I only do academia on the side, although I come from Wits University. So I am actually predominantly at CULS, the Center for Applied Legal Studies, as a human rights attorney or a human rights lawyer. And these cases I'm going to speak to you today about, at least so far as the Supreme Court of Appeal is concerned, and this recent one we were in last week, I have been in court on those cases. So I come from this, from being in the court and from that perspective. And yeah, just to kind of let you know that's where I'm coming from with regards to my views on these matters. So as has been said before, what I want to reiterate is a couple of years ago, there was rightfully a lot of anger around a judgment that came out from the Grahamstown High Court. And this judgment overturned a regional magistrate's court decision around a rape. And I just want to highlight I'm trying to make this as not legal as possible, but the law convolutes consent. It makes it very difficult. Something like your VC had said that should be very simple. The law convolutes it a lot. So I am going to try and explain those things as we go as well. But yes, rightfully so, we hear about this case where two individuals in a relationship engage in certain sexual encounters that have consent, and then there is the presumption by the accused person that because she consented to some things, he could proceed with penetrative sex. So what I'm speaking about is and excuse my butchering, my tongue is not very flexible. I'm going to say the Koko case because I'm going to embarrass myself. But and this case it dealt with this really important issue around consent and this really strange thing that emerges in criminal law called a mistaken belief in consent. So before I go into this it's quite a difficult thing to get around, this mistaken belief in consent. Before I go into all of that, let me just give you the facts of the case, so what had happened. So as I had said, these two individuals had been in an intimate relationship at the time, a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. The court called it a love relationship. So that's the type of relationship they were in at the time. And this makes it different to many other rapes where you may have an acquaintance rape or you may have a stranger rape. But it's still, this is specifically where this issue of mistaken belief in consent comes in. Because people say, oh, you know, she consented before when we had consensual sex last week, she's probably consenting now. So it really emerges from these intimate relationships where it's less easy to say, oh, I had a mistaken belief in consent when I attacked her in the dark while I was walking down the street. So you can see how these different types of things play out in different ways and we'll see how that plays out in the law. So they had previously discussed the complainant. So I say the complainant, you can say the victim, the survivor, but just to keep it, because there's loads of appeals and people's titles swap names in appeals. You get like the accused, the appellant, the da-da. So I'm going to say accused, complainant, okay. So they had previously discussed the complainant's unwillingness to engage in penetrative sex with a penis, not penetrative sex with a finger or anything else. Penile penetrative sex. She had said, no, I do not want to engage in this. One of her reasons was I am a virgin and I want to keep it that way for whatever reason. And this is before this even happens. Then you get to the day and the night of the incident. And the two engage in some consensual sexual encounters. So there's kissing, and then they engage in consensual oral sex. But they only do this when the accused tries to take off the complainant's pants, and she puts her legs together to say no, and he reassures her that he's not going to try and have penetrative penile sex with her. He says, no, I'm not going to try and have sex with you. It's okay. She says, okay. Then they engage in oral sex. So you can see a pattern emerging of no's here. So when people say it wasn't so clear, and that's what a lot of people, a lot of less progressive people said that it wasn't so clear, you can see there was a clear pattern here. So after the oral sex, and he's now removed his pants, he gets on top of her and he inserts his penis into her vagina. And she tries to push him off, and this is, in law, we call this common cause. It means that both the accused and the complainant, it was both the same in both of their evidence, so what they told the court. It was common cause that she said, you are hurting me, and that she requested him to stop. And it was also common cause that during this, he would stop and then start again, despite the fact that she had said these things. So when the court again says, I think he's mistaken about his belief in consent here, yeah. So we get the High Court judgment, and this is really a judgment that shocks people. It shocks many people. It's published, the judgment and the outcome is published all around South Africa. People are saying, based on these facts, and this guy has been told beforehand, he's told during the incident, he's told over and over again, he's acquitted. The High Court overturns the decision of the Magistrate Court. The Magistrate Court says he is clearly guilty of rape here. We say guilty, 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 as most of us would probably say too. High Court says, I think there's a mistaken belief in consent here, and we acquit him. We let him go. So people are rightfully furious. The High Court judgments, and this is just some of the statements the court said, and this is a huge issue for me, and it should probably be a huge issue for a lot of you because it's ridiculous. So the High Court, after the Magistrates' Court finds the person guilty, says things like, the complainant was an equally active participant. She was not merely passive. She watched him take off his clothes without raising an objection. She knew he was erect. She did not object to oral sex. And this is where I say, and rightfully said before, is consenting to some things, and then this just means consenting to everything. So here the High Court saying, now, she consented to that oral sex, so maybe he was confused. This is the line of the logic of that decision. The appellant, so the appellant is the accused's evidence was when the complainant said the penetration was hurting, he would stop and continue. I told you that was common cause. No force or threats were used to coerce the complainant, which is not a requirement in South African law, which slips in loads of our cases. She didn't have to scratch him or scream or anything. I think she already did enough when we went through the ones before this. But the court said, okay, she didn't, there was no force. He was not using force against her, and she was not having to resist in any way. She didn't resist. And this goes to why he may have been mistaken, which I say is implicitly reestablishing something we got rid of years ago, which was that women should have to fight for it to be considered as rape. And then this is the thing that comes up. This is this weird thing in law that came up and is a problem. And I say it's a problem because we still keep consent as a definition of sexual offenses, which sounds wild, but I'm going to explain to you why it's not later. So the court finds that the accused mistakenly believed that consent was present. This means that the state fails to have met the threshold to show that the accused had the intention required. So based on all of those things I told you about her saying beforehand, no, I don't want to do this, during, no, I don't want to do this, you're hurting me, please stop, get off me, the High Court found that the accused person had a mistaken belief that consent was present. And even if this mistaken belief was crazy, unreasonable, it's still a defense in our law, and it allows you to get off of the crime. So you become acquitted. So you can imagine that people were angry, and we wanted to see something happen. And you would assume with such a judgment that the National Prosecuting Authority, who brings these cases, would race to the Supreme Court of Appeal to get this decision looked at by the higher courts. They did not race. We wrote to them, many, and I'm sure my colleagues here were part of that. Even myself at CALS, I had a letter that we wrote to the National Prosecuting Authority requesting them to send this case to the SCA for a year. After a year, the case proceeded and we went to the SCA. Now, importantly, and this is the point of today, is we really want to highlight the excellent decision in the SCA around this. The SCA more or less said the High Court got this wrong. And this is some of the things the SCA says. And where it's legal, I'll just explain it to you a bit more. The prosecution must establish the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'm sure from crime shows you guys and court shows you've heard of that before. It's the highest threshold that we have in law of what you need to show. And your state has to show it. The accused does not need to do this. The accused does not need to meet a threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not do something. And that is fine. That is the way we want it in law because of a history of finding people guilty of crimes without proper processes. So that is fine. So there must be no reasonable possibility that an innocent explanation which has been put forward might be true. So now, the SCA says all the evidence must be looked at together. You can't just look at the accused version that he thought or he had a mistake and that there was no consent. You needed to look at the complainant's version too, and her version, it was never found that she was not a trustworthy witness. Never found in any of the court. So why did you fail to look at that, High Court? So if you look at both the accused version and the complainant's version, we start to see something different coming up here. So it's less likely that he was mistaken. On his version alone, perhaps he was mistaken. But if we look at her evidence and what they had in common, this defense is not really going to work. And then this is the real one. If anything today, just remember that the SCA has said this. Consent to foreplay and oral sex will not suffice for purposes of having consent to penetrative sex. So that's a lot of legal jargon, but what it means ultimately is the Supreme Court of Appeal is saying just because you consent to foreplay or kissing does not mean you consent to everything. Our Supreme Court has said that. Okay, so if anything, remember that. Okay. And I don't want to load you down. A lot of this stuff after this is more legal stuff. But what the SCA really was saying, and with this mistaken belief in consent thing, is it was saying you need to look at these factors and you need to see whether it was reasonable that someone could be mistaken, have a mistaken belief. And there are times people could have a reasonable mistaken belief that there was consent, such as, and this is because consent is still an element of sexual offenses. I'm going to die on this hill with this thing, but if you have a situation where a woman is saying, sex for marks, or a woman is saying yes, yes, yes to her boss, but she means in her brain, no ways, that might be a reasonable mistaken belief, and that might work in our law still. So it might work because we have consent as a definition in the definition of sexual offenses. So where did we go after this? Well, some people say the SCA wasn't really clear about whether mistaken belief and an unreasonable one is or isn't in our law. I think it was clear that it isn't. So last week we were in the High Court for a case called Embrace versus the Minister of Justice. And Embrace was arguing that it is unconstitutional to have an unreasonable mistaken belief. So this would be the mistaken belief we saw here, where it's absolutely ridiculous. The Center for Applied Legal Studies, so myself and my colleagues said, guys, and as my colleague quoted from my paper, the problem is having consent as a definitional element. And I'm going to explain this to you in the easiest way possible. When we, and this is for lawyers, there's a lot of laws have, when we have something like assault, so you punch or two people punch each other in a bar, or one person punches the other, rather, let's say that. When you look at what the definition of assault is, it's the use of force against an individual. So it's an unlawful use of force. And at no time does the court have to say, did you consent to being assaulted? Because it's not in the definition. You can raise it as a defense. So when we look at assault, or we look at murder, okay, in Germany at one stage, someone consented to being murdered by someone else, and the court found that very problematic. But we don't include consent in these other violent crimes. The accused can raise it later as, or even in theft, like if you steal something, you can go to court and say, oh no, but Sheena gave it to me, and she consented, and then the court will be like, oh, there's a defense. But in sexual offenses, we include consent in our definition. So it is penetration, unlawful penetration without consent. I think that's more or less it. And what happens is that the state needs to prove that. The state needs to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, this one up here, that the complainant did not consent. So as future reading and considering, why do some crimes that don't have women as the main survivor or victim, why do they contain such a high standard and other crimes don't? And then maybe think about where laws come from. Well, laws are mainly historically made by predominantly white men, and then you wonder why this threshold is so high. So in this case, Culls is challenging having consent as a definitional element of sexual offenses and says, no, You make it like all the rest of the crimes, like theft, like assault, and let the accused raise it as a defense. So the state doesn't have to make the woman come and stand up here and say to a court, these are all the things that I did to say no. So we've had enough of that. So keep an eye out for probably 8 months when we get judgment, and we'll see which way the court went with regards to those. But importantly, the SCA has said, and I like to say, it's from an Australian band. It's called, their lyrics are, "A kiss is not a contract." And that's what the SCA has said, if you remember anything, that a kiss is not a contract in our law, and consent to one does not mean consent to everything else. Okay, thanks so much.
Oh, wow. Straight to the point, ne? Straight to the point in a very simplified manner. That is what we are seeing here. Before we actually call upon our next speaker, Doc, I'm going to ask Ugaiwe to asenzele number one, everything number one, ngoba ifote were also number one. Ne? You want that one? Do you want it? Okay, let's go for it while we are preparing to call upon our next speaker, Dr. Lindsay Kelland from Rhodes University Center for Leadership and Ethics, who's an activist account response, who's going to give us a response to the case. So while she's preparing, it has been declared, the Vice Chancellor said it openly, transparently, that the soil, the culture, the climate of University of Fort Hare is like no other. Uchilo Vice Chancellor, what he and he's made sure Uguti is going to retire from this university because there's no any other, and I repeat, university. So it means what University of Fort Hare number one, everything number one. We don't want to be public enemy, no. But we are just number one. We can't help it. Can you please everything number one? Forte number one. Yeah, boy. You want that one? Do you want it? Okay, let's go for it while we are preparing on our next speaker, Dr. Lindsay Kelland from Rhodes University Center for Leadership and Ethics, who is an activist and response to the case. So while she's preparing, it has been declared, the Vice Chancellor said it openly, transparently, that the soil, the culture, To be continued. Thank you so much. We to try everything. Number one, blessings number one. And then I think we actually have to ask Makatsi to change and say 40 number one. Thank you so much. Before I call upon Speaker Setukatse Senchilo, you know, one good thing is when you visit other universities, or if you are invited to come to another university, let me put it across like that, you are always accompanied. Bakukhapha ngesintu sithi kumele ukhapha sozuphonga ufika nje wedwa nje uhamba as if lapho vela khona kulabantu. So I was impressed because Doc did not come alone. I did it on purpose not to introduce the team that she came with. I said I'm going to wait for the right moment. And that moment is now. So Doc is being accompanied, please give me just a moment, by two very vibrant ladies. The other one actually said, when we met the Vice Chancellor earlier, and the Vice Chancellor said, but you look as if you are scared. Then she whispered to me and said, yo, I am not scared. I never thought I would meet the VC face to face. This is huge. And I said, no, I understand. Even with me, though I have met him numerous times, but every time when I have to be on one-on-one with him, there's something in me that will say, this is not just an ordinary person. What he has done, what he continues to do, and what we are yet to see on its own always makes you to have goosebumps. So Doc is actually being accompanied by two colleagues from Rhodes, Vuyo Bateni, Project Research and Communications Officer, Equity and Institutional Culture Office. Vuyo, shine, shine, shine. Vuyo, you're not shining. Vuyo, shine, shine. Thank you. And we also have Utembale Tunumalo. I am not scared. An intern at the Equity and Institutional Culture Office. Tembale to shine. Tembale to shine, shine. Let me just tell you a secret, ne? Please ask the Vice Chancellor for a picture before you go. That will be a reminder. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a secret. I hope no one hates that. And then I would like to welcome Doc Linsley Kenland from Rhodes Center for Leadership and Ethics. Before I call her on stage, there's just one thing that I want to say about her. She's not only a feminist, but also she looks at the transformation in pedagogy, in higher education, in gender, sexualities, and violence. So actually the right person to give a response to the case that we're looking at today on the issues of e-consent. And also she received the Vice Chancellor Distinguished Award for Community Engagement. And then just recently, 2022, she was featured in the Sunday World Phenomenal Women for 2022. When I saw her, actually, I said, you are phenomenal. This is Women's Month. Are we not phenomenally made? Are we not phenomenally made? Are we not wonderfully made? Are we not beautifully made? I have the honor to introduce our speaker who's going to respond to the case. Dr. Kenland, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Put my water down there. Okay, and get my pants down. All right. So I get a little bit nervous when speaking in front of people, so I actually wrote my thoughts down so that they're all here with me, and I get through what I want to say in the 15 minutes. and then we're going to open up for a discussion. And yeah, that's what we're all here for. So I don't want to take too long. All right, so I've been working on gender-based violence and rape in particular for the past 15 years. My activism in the area began before I started working academically on the topic and sprang from my own experience of rape 23 years ago, coupled with a growing awareness of what has come to be known as the scourge of gender-based violence in South African society. Indeed, South Africa is said to be characterized by a rape culture. Our ways of being in and perceiving the world are described as supportive of rape and rapists. Our culture, and we can unpack this in our conversation, is characterized by a hegemonic, heteropatriarchal order that valorizes militant masculinities and positions women as second-class citizens. In Pumkola's terms, South African women are taught the language of rape, taught through production in the female fear factory to dread the almost inevitable certainty that they will be raped and will be held responsible for being raped. So young girls and women are drilled on how to avoid rape, given advice on where to be and not be, what to wear and not wear, what to do and not do, in the hope that they will not be the 1 in 3. According to my male students, young men are taught by the older men in their lives that a woman who says yes to sex is loose, that they must find a good girl who says no and pursue her. In these conditions, consent is turned on its head. A no is what many of my students are looking for, where the game begins. Indeed, I spent a good 2 hours in a male residence on campus during Rhodes University's infamous Are You Reference List protests, with young men who were genuinely trying to think through the difference between seduction on the one hand and coercion on the other. At one point in the conversation, one of the young men remarked, "Then we are all rapists." Unpacking their concerns took us 2 hours, and while I doubt that they were all rapists or are all rapists, our conversation showed me something that I do not often see, which is a genuine desire on the part of young men to understand the problem and their role or complicity in it. For many years now, anti-rape activists have called for more work with men and boys to curb the scourge of gender-based violence in South Africa and around the world. So the UN's global He for She movement is a case in point there. And what should this work focus on? More and more, it seems to me, especially in the light of this case and the responses of many young men to it, that furthering young people's awareness and understanding of consent is central to this work. So you've already heard the details of the case, so I'm not going to dwell too much on those in my time today. Rather, I want to touch on some of the responses I just mentioned, and the sexual entitlement to women's bodies expressed in them and tacitly upheld by the High Court's acquittal of the guilty verdict against Loyiso Xoko. It is, in my view, precisely this sexual entitlement, particularly in the context of intimate relationships, that the Supreme Court of Appeal's overturning of this acquittal both highlights and problematizes. I also want to briefly touch on the importance of shifting the stigma and burden of proof from the victim survivors to the perpetrators of rape and call for ongoing work to promote a culture of consent in our communities. So let's turn first to some of the comments found on social media after the High Court's acquittal of Loyiso Xoko and before the Supreme Court appeals judgment. As I do, bear in mind Xoko's own defense of himself as simply, quote, going with the motion, something the Supreme Court of Appeals cites as a factor contributing to their judgment, and I quote the judgment here. The fact that when he testified, the respondent could only provide an incoherent and nebulous explanation as to how it came about that he ended up sexually penetrating her vaginally, being content to suggest that he was overcome with the passion of the moment. End quote. All right, so in the aftermath of the High Court's acquittal of Xoko, the case came alive both in the media and on social media. And I found the following comments on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm old, so I'm still on Facebook. I'm not on the other ones. All right, so I'm just going to give you 5 and then talk a little bit about them. All right, so this is the first one. You can't play naked with a man. You can't go to a man's place and take your clothes off and lay naked next to him the whole night and say you don't want sex. The second one. All right, the second one goes, and they just get worse from here. You've heard it said, no is no. Well, a no or stop must be in line with your actions. Consent is both explicit and tacit. Consent can be explicitly denied while tacitly given. All right, the third one. The minute you put a man into a position where he is intimate with you, his mind dies until he ejaculates. It's how God created us. Now, why would a woman allow herself to be naked and even do oral sex with a man she's not ready to sleep with? Fourth, when you play with a man's penis, expect in most cases a diplomatic demand. I don't even know what that means. A diplomatic demand for penetration. If you're not ready or don't want to get burnt, don't play with fire. All right, and the last one I want to share with you today. It's physiologically difficult for a man to play sex and then not go all the way. Why is Virgin Girl playing around with loaded guns and not maybe get a toy instead? I have never seen an impala saying to a hungry lion, let's play the chasing game, but do not bite me. All right, so I want to say a couple of things about these comments. And I want to invite you to critically think about them further, both in our conversation after this presentation and moving forward in your residences, in your friend groups, particularly the young men in the audience, please. Right. So first, these comments perpetuate an essentializing, and we can talk about that, and not very flattering depiction of men as natural aggressors, even predators wielding loaded weapons, unable to control themselves when taken over by their sexual urges. That is not a flattering picture, guys. Second, as already mentioned, they are indicative of an internalized sense of sexual entitlement to women's bodies on the part of men that is most clearly expressed in intimate relationships. This entitlement can be seen in the questions that are posed rhetorically above. Both messages about what it is to be a man and what men are supposedly owed in intimate relationships with women demand urgent attention. And for me, that is one of the reasons why the overturning of the High Court's acquittal and reinstatement of the Regional Court's guilty verdict by the Supreme Court of Appeals is so important. It directly challenges the sense of entitlement. So I'm by no means a legal mind by nature or training, but a conversation between South African advocate Ben Winks and my late friend and political analyst Eusebius McKaiser shed light on this for me. According to Winks, the law, as the High Court applied it, and he thought it applied it correctly, Eusebius disagreed, right? So according to Winks, the law, as the High Court applied it, distinguishes between the lawful and the criminal, and maintained that to establish a guilty conviction in a case of rape, the act must be shown to be both unlawful and criminal. So, in other words, what this means is that the act must fulfill two criteria. The accused must both have actually committed, that's the first one, and two, have intended to commit the crime they are accused of in order to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. An act may be deemed unlawful from the objective point of view of what was actually the case, while nevertheless not being deemed criminal from the subjective point of view of what the accused believed to be the case, right? And if this is so, a guilty verdict cannot be delivered. So the High Court's verdict, Wing suggests, that while Koko's behavior may have been deemed unlawful, the presiding judge did not deem it criminal. The first criterion, potentially they thought may have been satisfied, that this was unlawful, but the second not, right? The second has to do with what they call mens rea, which is your intention, right? So in this light, in conversation with McKaiser, Winks called for rape law reform, arguing that, quote, the problem with our law is that my own backwards beliefs about consent and about the way women should behave if they are not consenting is my get out of jail free card. And the more backward my thinking is, the more likely I am to get acquitted. It's perverse. How that can be the law is unconscionable, end quote. In an article published the same year called South African Law Needs an Overhaul to Protect Rape Survivors, Winks explained, this means that a purely subjective belief in consent is a complete defense against a charge of rape which succeeded in the Toko case, at least at the High Court. Thus, even though our rape no longer recognizes rape myths, such as that a woman is only raped if she screams or shouts or kicks or screams, it allows a man who believes rape myths to escape criminal conviction. Most obscenely, the less progressive the man's views about consent, the more likely he is to be acquitted, end quote. So according to Winks, the High Court's judgment lamentably held on Toko's claim that he reasonably believed in the presence of tacit consent to penetrative sex, given his then-girlfriend's consent to kissing and oral sex, despite her explicitly seeking his assurance, both at the time and in earlier conversations, that he would not press her for penile penetrative sex. She had made her wish to remain a virgin explicitly clear, both at Toko's attempt to remove her pajama pants on that night and in numerous other conversations that the couple had engaged in before the night. I know many of you will understand that virginity is culturally seen as very valuable in a number of cultures, right? So she had a vested interest in maintaining her virginity. In my opinion, the High Court's ruling entailed that regardless of what is explicitly agreed upon between two or more parties to a sexual encounter, consent to so-called foreplay, to the real thing, what do we even mean by foreplay, particularly in the context of an intimate relationship, counted as sufficient evidence for a reasonable belief in at least tacit consent to penetrative sex. And I agreed with Winks that that was perverse. McKaiser also endorsed Winks's concerns regarding the subjective criterion while he disagreed that the law had been applied correctly in this case, and he also endorsed his call for rape law reform. So in Yubi's words, Yubi is what we used to call him, sorry. So in McKaiser's words, quote, this case errs by setting a precedent of defining subjective as being whatever the whimsical desire of a person at a particular point in time is. The court needed to drill down into the space between the whimsical and objectivity. End quote. He also argued, insightfully, I believe, that the High Court's verdict, quote, underscores the sense of entitlement men have over the bodies of women and the disregard we have for their agency. It also treats men as children who should not be expected to act like adults, and does so at the expense of women's safety, bodily and psychological integrity and dignity. It is catastrophic in its effect in multiple ways that only apologists for rape culture can underestimate, end quote. So, in my opinion, it is particularly in light of this understanding of the ways in which our rape law can be interpreted that the Supreme Court of Appeal's decision to overturn Toko's acquittal and reinstate his conviction as guilty of the crime of rape should be considered a crucially important legal moment in the history, development, and clarification of rape law in South Africa. So let me drive this point home, just briefly. If Winks and McKaiser are correct, if our law, as it stands, gives those with the least progressive views about sex and consent a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to rape, and public opinion is expressive of particularly regressive views in this regard, then the urgency with which we need to address the matter is clear. In closing, I want to end on a cautiously more positive note. First, the Supreme Court of Appeal's judgment shows us how our rape law, when interpreted with a feminist lens and in the spirit of our Constitution, can further the cause of survivors by shifting the focus and burden of proof from the victim and their actions onto the perpetrator and his, normally, questioning whether the accused took reasonable steps to ascertain consent. Second, after years of feminist consciousness raising in South Africa around the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence, we do seem to be seeing something shifting in young women's standing up for their rights to bodily integrity and speaking up, pursuing cases such as this one in the courts. And I leave you with this question: how do we build on this work moving forward? Thank you.
Another round of applause. Honestly, I'm sure all of you are feeling exactly the same way that I'm feeling. I want to take appreciation on both of our speakers. The way that you have put this case on board for us in the most simplified and understandable manner, such that even if now as we venture into our discussions, it's going to make our life so much easier. Because before, when I saw, okay, we're going to be inviting people that have to do with law, the first thing I was like, what do I do? Do I go with my dictionary? And then I don't know, maybe if someone who's going to be interpreting for me all these big names, and everything, what they mean. But the way that it has been presented to us and the response that you just gave, in fact, when I was starting with Shina, the way that you talked about, both of you are touching on the issue of maybe the upbringing of the boy child. You are also touching on the issue of the rape culture in South Africa that is so deeply ingrained in such a way that even if when you say no, like what Lindsay just said now, then you are being told that is the girl that you're supposed to go after. After today, we are changing the script. We are changing the narrative. May I take this opportunity? I think we had our students that actually entered, in the competition that was on our daily bulletin. It ran for months, and then we have 3 students out of the entrance that we had. There are some issues that they touched on, and we're just going to give them just 2 minutes before we go into our conversation to elaborate, probably just in brief, on what was going on through their minds when they submitted, their work. So may I have the opportunity, this is your time to shine, and I want you to shine, shine, shine as you come on stage. May I have the opportunity to call upon Luniga, to call upon Bugani, and also to call upon Utumani to come and join me here. Thank you so much. Shine, shine, shine. Shine, 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 shine. Let's clap hands for them. Let's welcome them warmly. Thank you so much. I'm going to start off with Luniga on your thoughts, on consent. After going through your entrance and everything that you said, maybe as a way of continuity, can you please just elaborate just in brief to say on how traditional cultural values and sayings like kukhala esami isicathulo apha ndiyindoda mna, and wena ungumfazi into oyiyo uyinto nje, have impacted on your understanding and personal experience with consent. Over to you, Luniga.
I'd like to extend my greetings to the House at large and all protocol observed. Just to elaborate on what was going on in my mind when I wrote that. Growing up as a girl in Black communities, there's a lot of traditional roles, and in these communities we are taught that men are superior than women and that we have an inferior role in society. We are told that as women we are not supposed to be opinionated, and that opinionated women are not good women. We are taught to be quiet, to be submissive, and to tend to the needs of men. So that kind of makes us confused, especially in romantic relationships where we are expected to have our voice, But because we are raised to believe that a man is always right and that a man is supposed to set tone for what happens in relationships, and that women are not, these traditional roles do not encourage women to be the ones who initiate sex, but we are also expected to always be ready when a man wants to initiate sex. So when you want to oppose that, it's almost like an indirect invitation for him to go and look for it elsewhere. We are told that, no, if you don't give him what he wants, he's going to go and look for it elsewhere. He's going to leave you. So in as much as you might not be wanting to give consent, things like that are instilled in our minds when we grow up, we almost, it becomes second nature to tend to the needs of men, and it becomes impossible to stand against that, and to also stand against something we grew up being told and something that we saw our parents doing, our mothers doing. So that was what was going on in my mind when I decided to write. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for opening the floor for us. This is actually now open to all of us to discuss on this. You know, she touches on something very important, and while to do the discussion, we are also allowed to touch even on what Lindsay said and also on what Ushina said. This is open house. Feel free to talk. Uchiru Vice Chancellor, let's talk about this. She talks about the upbringing of the girl child. It's instilled in us. Ukuthi nxa ungamphanga uzahambe efumana kwenye indawo. Do we agree on that? Can you please elaborate? This is not for me to talk about this. This is about you. You came here to talk about consent. Let's talk about consent. Where are our roving mics? Can I see the roving mics? The roving mics. Let's have the roving mics. Already I can see a hand up there. Someone is itching to say something. Please, can we have the roving mic? Thank you. Please, let's keep our responses short, nice, and straight to the point, and state your name, who you are, and the campus where you are from. Thank you so much. Over to you.
My name is Bulelani Manjose. I'm from the East London campus. My name is Bulelani Manjose. I'm from the East London campus.
The mover.
Okay, sure. The name is Bulelani Manjose from the East London campus. So where I would like to start is, I'm a law student. So you'll forgive me, I will speak on some confusing terminology. So we were given this as an assignment in criminal law last year.
Oh, wow.
And in that assignment, we were actually expected to, at that time, this court judgment from the SCA had not been here. We're working on the High Court judgment, and I was very puzzled. For me, as a law student, not even as a lawyer who's finished his degree, clearly understood that this case was proved beyond a reasonable doubt. So what was there to discuss? And then what really threw me off was the principle of legality being put into all of this, that crimes should should be interpreted narrowly and not broadly. But the gist of the matter was, where does tacit consent fit into all of this? Because tacit consent is a principle that applies to it's something that applies to principles of contract. This is a matter that is of rape. So actual consent is of the essence. So you can't have things like tacit consent, whereby you agree to give this person oral sex, and then it's implied from your conduct that, okay, you actually agree now. At the stage where you start giving him oral sex, you actually agree to penile penetration, whereas you had stated previously, I do not want this. So does then this tacit consent overturn the actual, overturn what you had actually said, that you do not want to have penile penetration? That was the main question that left me puzzled throughout reading the case, but at the end of the day, I had to complete my assignment and, and get those marks, and it has puzzled me up until this day. I actually thought that I misunderstood the law, but we are grateful for the Supreme Court of Appeal, specifically from CALS, when even the National Prosecuting Authority had failed us in such a manner, in such a case. So, in cases of sex, this is my take on consent. I'll be brief. You cannot take consent from conduct. It's very clear. If someone does not say yes, that does not mean that by omission they say, take it. There's no impalas and lions here. There's men and women. We're of a human species. You can't say a man is a hungry lion, or it fits nowhere. We can't call ourselves, we should be part of a human species that does not have to identify women as impalas. Come on, let's grow up.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much when you remind us that consent is all about humanity. I'm loving that you're actually tapping on what the Vice Chancellor said earlier on to say this is all about humanity. And also leading again, that already had been given an assignment. I had no college shame. Sivele sasizothetha nge-consent kati kwivele ema-classroom sithethwe ngayo indirectly. We lead and they follow. Before I take on another speaker from the crowd, what you're just saying is actually leading on to one of our entrants in the competition, Ubugani, who was writing about understanding consent, reflections on the Makanda versus Togo landmark judgment. Ubugani, this is your moment. Maybe you tell us what specific elements should be included in a more precise legal definition of consent to avoid varied interpretations. Nanku kaloku ubhuti kade ethetha ngazi ukuthi there are so many varied interpretations. So what do we do? Over to you.
Thank you very much for your question. My work focused mostly on the legal aspect, or rather, I focus on the Sexual Offense and Related Matters Act, where I find it problematic that consent, as we know, is a cornerstone of sexual offenses, or rather criminal law, right? But then within the act itself, it gives a very vague definition of consent, and consent appears several times within the act. And that itself is very problematic. Hence, we even found ourselves in this case of Uxoko versus the state. Had there been a clear definition of this word, probably it wouldn't have escalated to that matter, where the survivor of Togo was actually re-victimized by the higher court before the judgment was later overruled by the Supreme Court of Appeal. So when we delve into the issue of consent, the Act in Chapter 1, where it gives definitions, it states that consent is giving, is agreeing on something and also voluntary participating on something. So now we have to look at the fact that there are certain factors that might lead to someone to agree on things. Factors such as psychological manipulation, right? So you might agree on something not because you genuinely want that, but there was manipulation. And there are also economic factors or economic powers that might play. And also power dynamics, for instance. You know, I'm having a potential employer coming to you and making pursuits for sex. And you find yourself agreeing to those things, not that you genuinely want to agree, but because of the circumstance you are in, right? So I do think that if you read the Act again, it actually gives like almost half a page definition of sexual offenses, which makes sense. But how about you also do the same with the term consent, which appears mostly? You know, in terms of consent, we should clearly define that consent should be affirmative, you know. There should be clear understanding between both parties of what they are getting into, right? So there be, and consent should be ongoing and should be stopped at any time, you know. I could agree on us having sex, for instance, but even after we've started, I can end, you know, my consent, and that should be respected, right? And now I do really believe that, you know, we're only letting common law take place into defining consent. And as like the lawyer that was here also stated that we have issues where even the judicial system might misunderstand consent, and that might put many people in trouble. For instance, if, can I just finish this slide? Okay. For instance, if the higher court, if the Supreme Court of Appeal didn't overrule the decision made by the higher court, we have lower courts who are going to use that case who are going to use the judge's ratio dissidenti, or rather the judge's decision as a basis of making judgments on other cases that might happen related to that matter. So we would have many victims that are re-victimized and told that they gave consent because they allowed kissing and then they denied penetrative sex. So there were many factors that, because of time, I'll end here. Otherwise I had a lot of...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Here's the reason why we call it a landmark judgment. Because had it not been a landmark judgment, just like what you've just said, this was actually going to be used as reference, and using it as reference actually in a very poor manner, you know. So as we continue with our conversation, one of our colleagues here who wanted to comment on what was said before we give others a chance in the house. Over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Setu Malala. I actually wanted to add on to something that she had said. She had spoken about how in our culture, women are basically groomed to accept uncomfortability, which I think is another important conversation that we should have when discussing consent. So a lot of the times you'll find that it's not even a matter of the fact that you're afraid that your boyfriend will leave you, or that you are, you know, those harsh circumstances when it comes to consent, but rather the fact that you are so accustomed as a woman with accepting uncomfortability that you would rather sit with the pain of what is happening to you than actually say that I'm not comfortable with us advancing from oral sex to penetrative sex. So sometimes you find that in a situation you actually say, can we slow down a little bit? Which I think that if you even have to get to a point where you have to point out the fact that you're uncomfortable and you need to slow down, then it should be a point where you stop, right? But as a woman, you would then phrase it as you being uncomfortable or you wanting to slow down, even though you know that you you just want it to stop. And we even see this when it comes to conversations that women themselves have amongst each other when they're talking about breaking virginity and how much of a norm it is to experience pain when it comes to your virginity being broken, and the fact that that is something that should be readily accepted, instead of having conversations about maybe implementing lubricants in, sex in order to be more comfortable as a woman, or actually engaging in a conversation that would make both of you understand where you are mentally in the conversation of sex. So I think in the conversation of consent, it's also very important that we as a society address the fact that we should not be letting women be accustomed to uncomfortability in general. And even when you're being hit on, right? And the fact that you have to try to avoid getting killed or slapped or being sworn at, right, as a woman. These are things that as a society we have to address, because we cannot live in a society where women have to be accustomed, where women have to be hold things in and be uncomfortable in order to maybe be safer, or maybe try to convince themselves that maybe I actually want this, because sometimes deep down that you don't want this. Most of the time, that you don't want this, but you will gaslight yourself in a way to try to convince yourself that maybe this is okay because this is my boyfriend and I love him, but because as a woman, you have been conditioned to accept uncomfortability. So I think that we should develop a space for women to be able to not only be uncomfortable, but express uncomfortability when discussing issues of consent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for reminding us that let us not normalize being abused in our relationships. And actually, we do not want to forget even people that identify as male in the house, because we can talk about consent. We also have very rare cases whereby males have come up to say, I did not consent for her, to go ahead and touch me. So this way it goes either way. Though all of us, we know that mostly it is women that actually get, to be affected by these issues of rape and sexual harassment. Yes, do we have...
Hello, everyone. I'll keep it brief because there's still another speaker to give us some comments. The only thing that I wanted to really, and I like that Mama P, sorry.
No, it's fine. You can call me Mama P.
Mama P touched on is, and I think one of the speakers said it, a heteronormative society is toxic. We're living in a society where we're saying it's okay, and even though we know it's not okay. Like you just said, uncomfortability. We've normalized the abnormal. As a social worker, I see it every day, and it scares me. It's like, how am I supposed to use my principles, my ethics, when I see that they're mistaken? They're the problem. So, issue of consent is so big. It's bigger than us even. It's a human problem. It's not a woman, a man problem. It's a human problem. Like our principal said, if I said I don't want to eat, I don't want to eat. If I don't want to take a walk, I don't want to take a walk. Don't convince me. Don't let culture be justifying that this is okay. It's not. So please, let's not, like Mama B said, minimize the minority. Men get abused. Men get silenced. Men don't have the spaces women have because culturally, they shouldn't need it. So when now things are happening and we hear that, ethics are being challenged, principles are being challenged, let's not say it's a man or woman. It's a human.
Thank you, Luhlumile, one of the upcoming social workers at the University of Fort Hare. No means no, so does I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to. I don't feel like it. I'd rather not do it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think so. Not right now. Maybe another time. Uthi jonga sithandwa sami ndiyazi ukuthi aduyilindele lento, but not today. Do you think they are not going to understand? It's about the way that we communicate. It's about the way that we understand each other. Uthi, this feels wrong. It's got repercussions. Make the other person, your partner, see the repercussions after that act has been done. And trust me, they are going to appreciate you. Tell them, I don't want to do this anymore. Rather walk away and be the enemy, but do something that is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And then you say, I don't want to leave. When they are telling you, let's go somewhere, tell them, I don't want to leave. And of course, stop. A very simple word, STOP, in capital letters, underscored, bold, font size 72. You can do that. As we continue with our program, let me ask our speaker, the student, who's also sitting here with us, who's also had one of the valid points that they raised in the competition that was there, uThumani. Uthi ethetha ngendaba ze-consent, and then we want to know, in your opinion, how should the courts address situations where consent may be ambiguous or where the complainant did not explicitly object at the time of the act? How do you think that should be addressed? A complainant ayizange object at the time of the act. Zithini court ke ngaleyo ndaba? Over to you, Kumani.
Thank you, ma'am. It is an honor sitting in front of you today to address my opinion on the issue of consent. Firstly, I am of the opinion that in the current case before the Supreme Court of Appeal, the respondent rather, Mr. Koko, did not rape his ex-girlfriend. The reason why I am of this opinion is because of the definition of a rape that is provided for by Section 3 of the Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 2007.
Kuyafundwa kune college.
So the act defines rape to occur rather when the defendant intentionally and unlawfully commits an act of sexual penetration with the complainant without the consent of the complainant. So what was at issue before this case was the issue of consent, obviously, and also the issues of the acts of sexual penetrations must be brought into light when determining the consent. So Section 1 of the Act, when defining what is sexual penetration, also includes the penetrating of another person's genital organs by mouth of another person. This is to mean that as it appears on the facts of the case that Mr. Koko did insert his penis into the vagina of his ex-girlfriend. So that act is said to have been unconsented. So let's revert to the issue or to the question now of oral sex. So oral penetration also constitutes penetration. This is to mean that when Mr. Koko inserted the penis, the act of sexual penetration was already ongoing. So we should not look or rather search for the element of consent as if on that case it was standing on its own, but there was actually an ongoing sexual penetration. So in those instances now, to answer the question that has been just asked, in those instances rather, the determination of the consent may be slightly ambiguous because there was an already ongoing act of sexual penetration. So in order to address this, the courts now should maybe I don't want to say formulate the law, but they should increase the standard or the level of of objection that is required. Because when one act of sexual penetration has already been taking place, at least an express objection would have been required in order to express that I am not keen to continue with this particular act of penetration. The courts must draw the line, because now the line between the lack of objection as well as the implied consent becomes vague. That is where the courts now should draw a line. They should draw a clear line by doing by adopting maybe, or by amending the statute in order to include on this element of consent, to include that at least a consent that is required for determining a validity of consent in an ongoing sexual penetration should be at least a clear and affirmative consent. That is to mean the respondent and the complainant must communicate it clearly whether should I proceed with this act, and then the complainant would say, no, you do not, you should not proceed with this particular act because I only consented to the initial act and not to the subsequent act. But in this case, there is a consent to the initial act and there is a lack of objection to the subsequent act. That is how the lack of consent as well as the lack of objection and the implied consent become in a point of overlapping, because the courts the prosecution cannot prove it beyond reasonable doubt that this subsequent act was intended to be a rape, as well as this subsequent act, the defendant should have known that it was not consented to, because in South Africa the form of consent that is recognized by the courts is express and implied consent. So when there is an allegation of implied consent as well as allegation of lack of objection, this line becomes blurry now. That is where the courts should address these issues by at least increasing the standard of consent that must be given when there is another initial act of sexual penetration that falls into the definition of Section 3 of the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any more questions to our speakers? Let us talk about this issue of consent. As the family say, it's not a to do about being male or female. It affects all genders and sexualities. Let us be open, give us other ways and means on how to take of this. Yes, I can see the microphone somewhere there. Thank you very much, Mama P. My name is Aphelele Maliwa, and I am from the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Unit. So I will not elaborate much more. So by starting to explain or to deliver my view is that consent does not have deviation. For us to stop going back and forth, we must know that consent does not have deviation. So let us try not to explain. In what you said, Putwamne, you are saying, firstly, masqale ekhaya ne. I would like to, if you are given a chance to explain, ukuba, who said oral sex is not sex? Ne? Singekayi penetration. Because what we are trying to run away from is the fact that even if nenze oral sex, that is sex enough. Ne? So also penetration, it's part of the act of sex. In you saying, Gubana,
the consent was already given, xa bekusenziwa oral sex, does not mean it was consent to penetration. There's a difference between saying, ewe ndiyavuma, go down on me, andifuni upenetrate. It's two different things, those. We must not include them. And it is very alarming, ne, to all of the trainings that I have done for EGBV when we are coming to the part of consent. When we are telling people about consent does not have deviation and what consent means, they are saying we are making sex boring. It's not that. It will be boring when you are there by the court.
Uyacho u-AP, uthi if I've allowed you to kiss me, it does not mean to say I'm saying go down on me. At that particular moment, I'm only interested in being kissed and cuddled. Let us not go any further. A no means, a no means, and a yes means, there's no in between, there's no sitting on the fence here. Where is the roving mic? Yes, over there at the top, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Mihleko Hliso, and I am from Alice campus. Ne? I think that the problem starts with when men interpret consent in a way that satisfies them and justifies their actions. Because when you say to a man that "Anfuni," he takes as if, no, we are close. I'm going to manipulate you, I'll buy you that Apple Watch that you want, and that automatically means that you are consenting with whatever that he says that you must do. He buys you that watch and then starts kissing you, and you say, kaloku andithi ndiyafuna. Athi hayi kaloku, you said you want that Apple Watch, here it is now, masenze. So until men learn and understand the meaning of consent and implement it, abasoze bayiqonde. If you say that consent means that, oh no, hayi wethu, umntu wam uzovuma, une-moods. It does not work like that. Know that no is no. If I say anfuni, so kuthi xa ndifuna uthi hayi masihambe saka KFC. Eventually you will agree. They must stop psychologically manipulating us. They must know that when we say no, we mean no. Thank you.
I can sense the issue of power dynamics here, ne? We can know about the power dynamics, muscle power in terms of cash. That one does not work. No means no. So kushushu apa, the house is getting hotter and hotter. We are a spade. Yes, I can see somebody wants to say something there. Please go ahead.
Sorry, my name is Wendy Mabusela. Firstly, I would like to say I'm glad for the comment that we got. Oh, sorry, guys. So I'm glad for the comment that we got. But if there's one thing that I've noticed about our speaker is that he was actually contradicting himself, because he stated some of the sections and the sections were agreeing with the consent, and then he was actually just contradicting himself. Because he was saying that there was a section that you mentioned, what does it say about rape? That section agrees that consent should be there. It says that consent should be there. The victim agreed that yes, we can do oral sex, but not penetration. So it could be that maybe the victim was suffering from what we call the culture, which was, okay, if this man, if I don't consent to this the oral sex, he might leave me, okay? But I am not ready because I want to preserve my virginity. So that guy, it could be that he had an intent that I am going to actually have sex with her. I'm not saying that he did, but it might be, okay? So you were contradicting yourself. Thank you so much.
Do you know what I'm loving about this? is the issue that we are critiquing this whole case and even the speakers that are sitting right here in front of us to show that what Dr. Lindsay was saying and Dr. Sharma really went through. I remember what Dr. Sheena, when she said, you can actually see that there were an imaging of no's, a series of no's from the word go. There was a no, I do not want. No, I want to keep my virginity. No, this is hating me. But still the perpetrator went ahead. Thank you for bringing up and for critiquing it. Well done. Shine, shine, girl, shine. Shine, shine, girl, shine.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Anda. I'm from the Alice campus. I wanted to ask a question to anyone who wants to answer it. The main point that I'm seeing throughout both of the speakers and even to you, my brother, is that the problem lies within the definition, whether be it in the definition we give culturally or the definition that we give in the court. So I wanted to ask, personally, to anyone who wants to answer the question, what is the true definition of consent in every form and aspect of it? Not just to say, I'm saying no, I am saying yes. What is the true definition of consent? We came here to speak on consent. What is the true definition? So we may leave here knowing and understanding what the true definition of consent. Yes, it is to say no and yes or whatever, but what is the true definition that will break the cycle of the repetition of the court saying that this is consent, this is not consent, whether it is written in acts or not? What is the true definition of consent?
Anyone who's willing to take that up, what is the true definition of consent? Can you please have the... okay, thank you.
I'm not taking up the question of defining consent. I'm just taking up the point to say to all of my first years, it's Dr. K, by the way, from the philosophy department. I'm hoping that you're taking notes because I told my first years to attend this particular discussion. I'm hoping that every single one of you are taking notes because we are going to discuss this next week as part and parcel of our course. Thank you.
I am suggesting that those that brought their smartphones and they can record, please start recording. And also, when we leave here, please go and sit wherever you are comfortable, and then you listen to this program go YouTube. Because Dr. K next week kuzabe kushush eklasini. Can you please give someone a chance? Please. The working definition for consent. You want to take it up? Okay, thank you.
Just for you to think about, well, some of this is in the law, but when you think about consent, some of the things are you have to, and this comes from contract law, is a meeting of minds that you have to know what you're consenting to. And someone had spoken about that, but even in the law it says you have to know that you're consenting to a certain type of act. And that would be different if it was, say, kissing to penetrative or any one of those. But some other things that the law says it should be uncoerced. And that's where we came to things of different power that individuals can have. So it shouldn't be coerced, it shouldn't be under duress, you shouldn't feel forced, because all of those things can do away with consent. So if you're being forced to say yes, that's not real consent. So when you're thinking about defining consent, think about things like sex for marks and how that could be a problem for what true consent should look at. So think of your issue here, with oral sex and penetrative sex, so different types of encounters, but then also start thinking about what happens if you're and I've thought about this recently, what happens if you're a person, an unhomed person, and someone's offering you food for sex? Is that going to be consensual? So just think of those things when you now start thinking of how you want to define consent going forward.
Yes, please. Oh, please.
Very, very briefly, because it is complicated, right? And there are these convolutions. My students have come to a conclusion, and I applaud it. Consent is enthusiastic, right? I am there, right? So earlier, Dr. Alsabrook, Dr. Chris, we studied together, and yeah, Dr. K. What was I saying? Yeah, enthusiastic, right? Earlier, Dr. Alsabrook said that it could be kind of embarrassing or awkward to stop what you're doing and ask for consent. But I want to challenge that, right? Think about, are we not vocal when we're engaging in sex? Oh, baby, is that good for you? Do you like that? Should I go on? Like, why is that embarrassing? Let's make it enthusiastic, right? If the person is enthusiastic, it's ongoing, it's consistent, then yes, you have consent.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Ngosi Suswam. Oh, igama lami ndinguKhanyisa, ifana yami ndinguKolisi. Mandilibulele ithuba. Ezibandi mane ndimame mandiqale ngokuthi ndiyaqala ukuva ngalo mcimbi kuthiwa i-sexual consent. Benimane ndiyibamba manqapha nje. Qha ngoku ezibandi imamele ndiyabala uba hayi man. Hey kodwa baninzi abantu abanidlwengulileyo. Like baninzi nam endibadlwengulileyo. Xa ke ngoku ngokungaqondi ba hey besidlwengulana. Kaya ngoku i-question yami ke ngoku sisi wam ilapha ke into yokubana no man i-consent ewe into ekhoyo but ayonto ipracticewa kakhulu apho sihlala khona. Yinto elapha ephepheni nento epha ecourt. Xa sasithetha ngokwenhlalo because ndiyabona bake sayipractice lento ngokusenyanisweni. There is a stigma esikhoyo sokuba hayi lo mfana uyabhora lo. Okanye le relationship ndikuyo ayinancasa man. Yabo. Okanye no lo mtshato ndikuyo athena ongafane lo mtshato kabani. Because yonke into apha ndiyacela nkosikazi, ndiyacela mntu wami. Uyayiva le nto ndizama uyitsho. And ngoku ndiyithethe iphezulu kwento yokubana kwimpilo esiphilayo nyhani i-social consent ihambela phaa kude kunathi. Uyabo. So ndizama ubuza ke ngokuba ndifuna ucaciselwa hleze ndikhanye nobheka phambili. Into edibenise nokucenga yona ima kuphi kunye ne-consent form. Because kwi-society yethu namantombazana esithandana nawo namadoda athandana nawo umcengo umninzi ukuze i-relationship ime. Funeke ndimcenge, ndiyamthanda, ndiyambona uba uyandithanda but yena akafuni ukuthi uyandithanda. Ufuna la force oba bendikhe ndacenga. Naxa mhlawumbi sizaya ngasebheyidini uyayifuna uyenza le nto qha uyaqonda uba bandimnike msinyane ootshomi bazandixeka. Makaqale akhancenge kuqala. Yabo. So ngoku sisi wami ke ngoku nawo nobhuta bakhula amagqwetha lana bake basicacisele umcengo lona lofuli ndisendiyithethela serious into yokuba xa sendicenga professor ndicenga ke ndihambe phi because lo mcengo ngakum ubeneficial ngakuye nayo ibeneficial kodwa xa sisixabene uzayisebenzisa lo mcengo oki ngathi ithule ngoku i-consent yokuba kakade bengafuni undifosile kodwa xa sasithetha inyani besiyifune soba ithule.
Do you know what we are going to do? What we are going to do is we round off this dialogue. I'm going to take 3. Kaloku sithe thina asizange kuzolala lapha ne kuyathethwa ke ngoku. So I'm going to take the first round of 3 who are going to give a response to our brother over there. Othi yena, how do we go about this? Can we give an opportunity to our guests from Rhodes University to give a response to us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Voyo, like I was introduced. One, I wanna applaud the GBV unit and the university for having this conversation, and not only having this conversation, but also creating a space for men and young men to engage and say their views in the conversation. Because we know a lot of times, as people who are doing this work, men are always seen to be wrong in the space. So it's quite important that we create a space where men can express and ask without the fear of being wrong, and also learning and unlearning in the space. But also, I just want to caution ourselves, particularly as the students, that the rape jokes or the carelessness and the words that we choose to use when we have these conversations also perpetuate the culture of rape in society. And the problem and the reason why we're finding ourselves in this kind of conversation or in this crisis as a country is because we have played around these conversations because we're uncomfortable to have them. But I think the students will know what the FRIES acronym is that is often used in the conversations of consent. We use the FRIES acronym because it is an easy thing to remember, that consent is an agreement. Consent applies in all languages. Consent not only applies in relationships of connection, but consent applies in all situations, all people, and all relationships. 1. And consent is isivumelwano in isiXhosa. So if you're asking yourself what consent is in isiXhosa, and how do I say this to my uneducated mother, my uneducated uncle or whatever, but consent is isivumelwano. Like the consent form or the declaration form you sign with the university when you come to the institution is consent. You are consenting to abide by the rules of the institution. It's the same thing that you do when you get into a relationship with a person, even though you are not going to sign a form, but you agree. But you are only agreeing to a relationship. That is why it's important for us to not play around with this, but take it serious, because it is a serious issue. And it is at the crux of the rape crisis in the country that we play around with consent. In a relationship with a person, you ask. It is a responsibility. As an adult, it is your responsibility that when you get yourself into a relationship, you ask for consent. You ask for clarity. Right? So you can't say, I see that she might want to go to the bedroom. She's shy. No, you are an adult. And one of the things about being an adult is asking for consent, like the VC has said. So if you are going to want to be an adult and you are going to want to partake in the conduct of being an adult, then you have to take the responsibility of asking. So you can't assume that a person wants to. You can assume. It also goes back to the entitlement that men have, and that's a stereotype that we want to break away from in these kind of conversations and as young men, because the big bad world is not gonna ask a joke. when you find yourself in this situation 3 years from now. The university is a safety net, and I urge men to use this space, these kind of conversations to learn, to prepare themselves for the big bad world outside. Because in the big bad world outside, we're not gonna sit like this, we're not gonna have a joke about it. It's going to be a real thing that is going to apply in your life. And yes, you will ask your wife, yes, you will ask your girlfriend, in the same way that you want to teach consent to young children. One of the things that we have done in the Uyina Mkhojana Foundation is to go to the high schools and ask a question. So it comes from, we've asked our first years at Rhodes University, what do you wish you knew before you came to university? And a lot of first years said, I wish I knew stuff about consent. I wish I knew what consent was. So we thought it was important that we go to high school, teach them as early as grade 9 what consent is. Not only teaching them and preparing them for sexual relationships, no, but making them understand that consent applies in all things. Something so small like, you have a pen, I don't have a pen, we are sitting next to each other. Can't just grab your pen and use it without asking for your consent to use it. So consent it applies from the smallest thing to the big thing like sex. So we should always think about consent and always remember the FRIES acronym. I don't know if you've seen, you know, McDonald's calls their chips, would call chips in South Africa, but they call them fries in America. So the acronym for fries is that consent is freely given, consent is reversible, which is very important. Consent is informed. You are saying yes to something that you know. When you say it's reversible, yes, I can say yes now, but when we get to the bedroom, I can change my mind, and that's fine. I no longer consent to, I change my mind. E means it's enthusiastic. You don't have to coerce me. So, xa undicenga to do something, you are coercing me to do something. You are manipulating me to do something. A person who is enthusiastic and is informed and is giving something freely, you don't have to beg them. You don't have to. And it's also culturally. I know in isiXhosa culture, intombazane iyacengwa to say yes to things because intombazana is a flower. But our problems also are rooted in culture. But culture is not an institution that is sitting there. It doesn't come from a vacuum. Culture is created by people. So as people, we can learn and unlearn in culture, and as Xhosa traditional people, we can still learn and unlearn. It's not something that we can't do. It's not like our skin color. We can't change our skin color, but we can change and allow our culture to evolve. And also, consent, like in the FRIES acronym, there is an S, so consent is specific. Are you asking me to kiss you? Are you asking to sleep with me? So that I agree to what you are asking me. Okay, does it make sense? I hope it does.
Wow. So next time when you go to a KFC, Ape Alice, singena stiyezi, singena HMC, singena Spa, when you see the fries, remember, even if when you are eating them, or even if when you're buying them for your partner, remember fries and remember consent. Thank you so much. Do we still have any more pending questions? We are rounding off. Remember, this is just the beginning. This is a series of many other dialogues that are going to come that have to do with consent. And it's good to get, because Dr. K is here and already has got something for the class that is going to be there. And honestly, I would love to be in that session in the classroom if I can, to see what's going to be happening as a follow-up of the discussion that has been done today. So I'm going to round off at the top there with one last other question, comment, and then we move on to the next segment. Thank you so much.
Molweni, igama lam ndingulisa Khanya Magandela. I am going to try so hard to answer Uputi, or rather in whatever I'm going to say, I am going to accommodate him very much, because I think the issue of ukutenga is quite problematic, and it is why niye nicinge ukuba xa sendithe ewe xa undicingile ndithe ewe nyani. Sorry. Ma'am Sheena, I'm sorry if I pronounced you in a manner that. So she outlined that consent is the meeting of minds. Ndaqala xa usithi ndicela silale ndathi wancenga ndathi ewe. That is not the meeting of minds. A meeting of minds ibipha xa ndithi initially hayi wancenga wena, then it is not a matter of mind. I am just saying yes to accommodate you because I've been conditioned, I've been shaped. It has been deeply entrenched in us to say yes kwinto ezinizifunayo because you guys are men. There is a difference with what I say ungekandicengi nento endiyitshoyo xa ndisendicengile, because le ndiyitshoyo emva koko ndicengile is to only accommodate you. It is not what I want. And also, I'm going to briefly take you to a society that we lived in and a society that we live in now. In a society which was prior us understanding our rights and the extent of them, in a society where besingeka understand that we have power in our voices to address you, in a society where the CCT yonke into esiyenzayo is to please you, nyani besiye sicinge kunyanzelekile umuntu endicengile ukuze ndithi ewe, but now is not the time. Now we understand that ndizothi hayi kayi-1 uforce we will meet in court. And also now, because men also are in a bid to create that safe space, or rather you guys want to be better people, I think it is important that you know why? Because you are protecting your dignity. You also want to be a safe space. You also want to contribute. Because the reason why is to go to your friends and say, that's the reason. And also in relationships, you'll have a problem to center sex. That's the only thing you want, because it doesn't mean I'm going to say no tomorrow. That is your problem. And that is not, I'm so sorry, but we are uncomfortable, and that is why we are in these spaces to tell you that not anymore. We can't be in such a community. That is why ke bhuti wami ndizama ukuthi ukusukela ngoku awucengi wathi hayi, that's it.
We can have this conversation for a long time, but I think also for us moving over with the program, we are going to ask Ndlovu, she's here, to recite a poem as Pateleona today. While this, we think deeply about what has been said about the use of words, carelessness of words, the way that we use our words, and also the sense of entitlement. Over to you, Ndlovu.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Zandile Ndlovu, and I'm from the East London campus. In front of you, I'll be presenting a poem which is based on consent in relationships. However, it's not only limited to relationships, but any other form of connection or relation that you may think of. The title of my poem is You Failed to Listen. This is a proclamation of my mind's commotion. No matter the relation, when I say no, you need to listen. I thought you would understand, but instead you persisted, and now I must live with this for my entire existence. Do you understand the definition of permission, or you just did it to fulfill your sensations? Yeah, we had a sensual relationship and probably a friendship, but when I say no, you didn't have to turn into a yes, because now my life is just a mess and I must try to start afresh, but this scar is just so permanent. Oh, how I thought you were kind, filled with benevolence, but when I said stop, you did it ceaseless. I was laying there hopeless, thinking you would stop, but instead you continued shamelessly. Yeah, we had an intimate relationship, but when I said no, you had to accept it. So tell me, you never had a deliberation of the repercussions that may come out of your actions, because not only did you break me, but you made me hate myself, and now I am questioning my entire existence. Do you understand the definition of permission, or you just did it to fulfill your sensations? This is an act that has nothing to do with intelligence, but how one uses their mind and controls themselves. What happened to may I, can I, could I? But now, I want to tell you that even if for a moment you thought you had the same intent, I command you that you ask for consent, because your actions may lead to a contravention, and I assure you with no fear of contradiction. But now, the problem is that we live in a world of inequality where being a woman is associated with vulnerability, but we strive for a world of equality where gender doesn't determine one's ability. We aim towards a society of equality where women's strength is celebrated with care and their rights are respected with justice rare. And with that being said, I say, wathinta abafazi, wathinta imbokodo. Enough is enough, and no means no. I thank you.
Oh, wow. What a way to round off our program. Wathinta abafazi, wathinta imbokodo. Wathinta abafazi, wathinta imbokodo, and no means no. Without further ado, I'm going to call upon Director wetu owe Gender Based Violence Prevention Unit, Nonhlanhla Moyo, asimphakamiseni ngengoma. I know she loves this song, igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Igama likakhosikazi malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Aha. Anthatheleli thuba ukuthi ndibonge udirector ome phambili kwethu apha. This is one phenomenal woman who, ever since she joined the University of Fort Hare, has changed the narrative in so many ways, and has not been shy, let me say, to go and tap into the best practices of what others has done at the University of Fort Hare, seeking guidance, networking. We are here today having the first dialogue on sexual consent, not only because of her, but also because of the leadership that we have, and also on her tapping on the zero tolerance to gender-based violence at the University of Fort Hare. Our director, as you prepare to hand over the checks to the students that entered the competition, we want to say to you, may this be the beginning of learning, unlearning, and relearning about sexual consent at the University of Fort Hare. Over to you, my director. Actually, before we do that, may I With all due respect, ask our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sakela Buhlungu, to come and join us at the front with Dr. Chris Olesbrook for the handover of the certificates and the checks as the director calls out the names of the winners. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Program Director. You know, when Chris reached out to me to say we need to partner on this event, never in my wildest imagination did I even imagine this kind of interest. I did not think that it would garner this kind of interest within our student community. And hence, to test the waters, we decided that we're going to come up with a creative competition, a call for creative works so that we could get submissions in terms of art, poetry, music, songs, essays, opinion pieces, and short stories. And we were really so overwhelmed by the responses that we got from students of the University of Fort Hare. Indeed, you are trendsetters, and if we had time, I was actually going to read out and call out each and every student that submitted their entry, because we recognize you, we appreciate you, and I'll tell you this, the wealth of knowledge and ideas and suggestions and reflections that came out of your submissions are only going to make us richer as a university, and they're also going to form part of an archive that we will use as this generation of students at the University of Fort Hare and beyond. And on that note, I want to say that not everyone is going to be a winner, and that's okay. You may not be a winner today, but I want you to know that what we plan to do is that we will take all the submissions that we received, of course with your consent, right? With your informed consent, and put them together into a booklet. So we'll work with you, edit them, put them into a booklet, and put that in our libraries, put them in our offices, hand over copies to the Vice Chancellor, right? So we are going to do that. You may not get a certificate today, you may not get a check today, but your name will remain in the history books of this university. Without further ado, the moment we have all been waiting for is finally here, and the entrants have no idea who it is. That's the exciting part of it. They have no idea who it is that is going to win. So we have 3 prizes, and it's in all the categories. So there's going to be 3 winners today. Our 3rd prize winner colleagues, friends, is none other than Sipogazi Tima. Congratulations, girl. Congratulations. And then moving on to our 2nd prize winner. You will not believe it. Our 2nd prize winner, who's also walking away with a check, is none other than Bukani. Bukani is walking away richer today. And now to our first prize winner. Our first prize winner, who will be walking away with a check signed by none other than our Vice Chancellor himself, is someone you are quite very familiar with, actually. Zandile Ndlovu.
Aha, awuyibambe sizoyiphinda futhi. May I take this opportunity to call upon our transformation lady, to come and give a vote of thanks. Over to you, Pali. A round of applause for our transformation lady in green.
Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. I'm happy to be standing here. I'm very happy. After such a robust and exciting event that we've had, exciting conversations, making history, I'm really excited. I feel like we're going somewhere. We're moving as a university. I would like to take the opportunity, mine is just to close and talk about the way forward. From here, where do we go to keep the momentum I mean, there have been interesting conversations, people are raising their hands, and would not want to let this go. We want to keep this going until a point where we're comfortable that we have a safe university campus, we have a safe University of Fort Hare. So I'd like to, first of all, appreciate the presence of our Vice Chancellor, who's always been with us, stayed in such conversations from beginning to end, making history, trend setting. No Vice Chancellor stays in such events from beginning to end. He deserves an award, he deserves an honor, because that's how he shows the kind of a parent, the kind of passion he's got for transformation, and ensuring that members of the university are entirely safe in the space. I would also like to just speak to how this has been a great conversation. I feel that this has been an opportune time for us to speak about very critical moments that shape our human relations. We've talked about a lot that really shapes our relations. It's not anything outside of how we relate with each other as human beings. We've talked about how issues of concern speak to humanity. This has indeed been an occasion for robust conversations on matters that speak to healthy relationships, which is what we aspire to have within the university. The conversations have been very robust in terms of what is really key and central in our cause in deciding the guilt or otherwise of anybody who's alleged of a gender-based violence matter, of anybody who's alleged of a matter that speaks to bodily integrity. They are very central and important, because beyond this, nobody in the space would want to find themselves in court or in a disciplinary hearing questioning their actions. So these are very important conversations. And most importantly, these are conversations that are very central to gender justice. They are very central to transformation within the university space. These are not conversations that were had in the previous years within university spaces, and they remain very, very important. And to us as the University of Fort Hare, we also feel also that they are very important in reclaiming a safer University of Fort Hare. Without which we cannot speak of safety. It is these conversations that drive us to a space where we know that gender-based violence prevention is your business and not just the business of the unit. And we are excited to have had you here. We're very excited to have had all our guests that have graced us with their presence from all the way in different provinces, not only within Eastern Cape. I would like in a special way to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Sheena from the University of the Witwatersrand. We really appreciate for coming all the way. We really appreciate you. I would also like to appreciate I also like to appreciate Kellen for being around us. It's an honor for us to have colleagues join us. And I'm aware that there are also colleagues from Royce University. We really, really appreciate to have you as gender practitioners in the space, as partners, as colleagues. I appreciate Vuyo, I appreciate Ngumalo for being amongst us. It's an honor for us as the University of Fort Hare. I also like to appreciate our student panelists who have shared where they were coming from in terms of their submissions. We also like to appreciate all the students that made submissions, that made entries onto our call. We're really honored. We're really honored. Our director has made a promise, and we hope to keep it in ensuring that your names are there. Even if you were not able to get a certificate today, we really acknowledge that. We also like to appreciate our poet as well and our winner for today, Ndlovu. My next appreciation also goes to our program director. Our program director, Dr. Belita, it has been an honor having you. It has been a real honor having you lead us throughout the day. We've had such an exciting moment with which time has moved without us seeing. Dr. Belita is a researcher, is a friend and a colleague within the University of Fort Hare, such as chair on sexualities, gender, and queer studies, of which we are proud of to have collaborated with, and that she's a part of us in the space. I mean, there's no way in which we can achieve transformation or gender equity without the support of institutions like the Sashi Chair on Sexualities. There is absolutely no way, and we are honored as the University of Fort Hare to have them in our space and really leading us. I would also end by thanking the organizing team, which is led by Dr. Chris and Ms. Moyo. We are led. That is why we've had such an engaging conversation. Everybody that works wherever in the backgrounds and every little thing that you did to make this a reality, we really appreciate you. And in terms of way forward, briefly, I'd like to just mention that from this, it has been clear that there's an excitement, there's need for us to engage more in such conversations. So the work of the unit beyond this is to make sure that because of the fact that consent is linked to almost the broader work of our work as the unit, especially the gender-based violence unit, we have 3 main campaigns that we plan to implement going forward, and within which we will definitely engage further. I'll mention the Reclaiming a Safer UFH. It is where we started at as we were launching our unit. And this conversation is part of Reclaiming a Safer UFH, as I did mention that it is through such conversations that we know that we are geared and are leading ourselves into changing behaviors in order for us to have a safe university campus. We are also planning and have already started on engaging on issues of gender-based violence and substance and alcohol abuse. This is because a lot of cases that we receive have got an alcohol component on. So we have a campaign. We'll hear from us in terms of the road shows that are in the pipeline. We have a lot that we'll be engaging the community in. I mean, we're at a point where we can never say because someone was drunk, there was no way in which both parties were drunk and intoxicated. I mean, we can never question consent. We are beyond that. We need to address why is it that our students are utilizing a lot of substances and alcohol and then end up being vulnerable to gender-based violence. So there's much that you can expect therein. And beyond that, we're also transcending UFH. We've got programs that are intended at ensuring that we celebrate inclusivity, diversity within the University of Fort Hare, within which, within the same year, we are planning to have at least a draft on inclusivity policy. Beyond the fact that we are also currently reviewing our gender-based violence policy. The 2019 policy is under review. The unit is welcoming comments, and this has been one of those very opportune moments in terms of us being able to redefine and think of what needs to go into the policy review. Do we need to really define it? A lot has come out in terms of that, and we are excited, and we really hope that all of us would make it a norm to request consent. Let's make consent sexy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, our transformation lady. Let us make consent sexy. Go be sexy of money consent. Thank you so much for gracing this occasion. And I would like to say, by the powers invested in me as the program director, today I hereby declare this dialogue closed. I wish all of you to travel back safely into your respective and beautiful places. Let's keep safe, let's keep warm, let's keep loving each other, let's keep looking out for each other. Enkosi kakhulu nangomso. Bye-bye.